There is a specific depth in the ocean where humanity's authority ends. We draw lines on maps and we claim territorial waters. We patrol the surface with billions of dollars of hardware. But travel below 300 feet, and the rules of geopolitical dominance evaporate. You are no longer a conqueror. You are a trespasser, and you become part of the food chain. Summer 1982, 7 frogmen set out to explore the deepest scar on the planet's surface. The location, Lake Baikal in southern Siberia, Russia. These are no ordinary divers. They're the Soviet military's elite. Disciplined, lethal, and equipped with the finest closed-circuit rebreathers. But by the end of the dive, 3 will be dead. What they experienced 300 feet down has been scrubbed from official histories, but records, they still exist. And they contain disturbing testimonies of 4 survivors, men who were forever changed by a terrifying encounter in the deep. Today we open the file on the Baikal Incident, a day when the Soviet Navy set out to capture a swimmer, and found out who really owns the waters. Lake Baikal is a lake in name alone. It would be more accurately described as a rift, a tectonic tear in the crust of the Earth where the Asian continent is slowly ripping itself apart. It holds 20% of the world's unfrozen fresh water. It is over 5,000 feet deep. The whole of Manhattan could actually sit inside it. 3 Manhattans could actually be stacked on top of each other and still not break the surface. For decades, the Soviet Navy has used Lake Baikal as a remote, secure testing ground. Remote, landlocked, and deep enough to simulate ocean pressure for submarine hulls and advanced torpedo guidance systems. The perfect place to hide black projects. But Soviet High Command had a problem. Their secure facility was not that secure. In the early 1970s, a bizarre report filtered up the chain of command. A submarine crew testing new sonar arrays tracked a target that was moving at speeds that defied physics. An underwater object clocking 200 knots, which is over 230 miles per hour. It had no cavitation signature, no engine noise, and no wake. Senior officials dismissed it as an anomaly. But this was no anomaly. One strange event is an anomaly. 2, maybe coincidence. But throughout the 1970s, similar reports continued. Officials continued to play them down, writing them off as results of fatigue or nitrogen narcosis. In intelligence, we look for patterns. And what was going on in Lake Baikal was clearly a pattern. By 1980, it should have been undeniable. Something mysterious was going on in Baikal's depths. For centuries, fishermen who knew these waters like the back of their hand passed down tales of silver people. People who inhabited the deep waters. They warned the military that the lake had a master. But the Soviet military had no interest in folklore. They were focused on the threat posed by the American spies, Western sabotage, and unauthorized incursions. 1982, Major General Victor Demyanko, commander of the military diver service, arrives at the lake with his team. His mission? It's simple. Penetration drills, engineering tasks at depth, and survival training. But the last thing on his mind is monsters. It should have been a standard week of operations, a routine training program for specialized combat divers. And at first it was. The team entered the waters, descended past the thermocline layer, and into a world of absolute silence. They think they're alone, under normal circumstances. A reasonable assumption. But something is waiting for them. Something that will make the threat of the Cold War look like a playground dispute. Let's analyze the engagement. The 7 divers descend to 50 meters. At this depth, the light is dim, filtering down in a heavy blue-grey haze. The water temperature in Baikal is barely above freezing. It creates a psychological compression as intense as the physical pressure itself. As the team make their way through the water, they suddenly notice movement on the periphery. Combat divers, now they're trained to classify targets instantly: debris, marine life, and man-made objects. In these moments, you have a fraction of a second to decide if your best course is to engage or evade. As they turn to face the movement, the divers realize they're looking at a formation. Enemy operatives? No. At least, no enemy they've ever come across before. In their reports, the survivors talk of humanoid figures wearing tight-fitting silver metallic suits. Now, these suits seem to shimmer in the low light. They are massive, nearly 3 meters tall, almost 9 feet, and swimming without diving gear. Now, let that sink in. 300 feet down, freezing water, massive pressure, but no scuba tanks, no rebreathers, no hoses, no face masks. Their heads were concealed in a spherical helmet, but there's no visible breathing apparatus, and no bubbles. The silver figures observe the Soviet divers. They don't attack, but they hold their ground, hovering in the water column, watching the Frogmen with a detachment that carries a confidence of total superiority. Now, if this were a standard military encounter with a foreign power, there would be an immediate protocol, an attempt to communicate with sign language, and then a decision: aggression or retreat. But the dive team could only watch, transfixed by the grace and the speed of these entities that made the gear-laden Soviet divers look like clumsy children stumbling in the dark. But the Soviet divers, they don't panic. Years of training have prepared them for anything. Well, almost anything. The team leader radios the command boat on the surface and reports the encounter. Visual contact: unknown swimmers, no gear, silver suits, request orders. The order comes back. The commander on the surface makes a split decision based on available information. He processes the reports as intruders in a secure military zone. He assumes these intruders are human, and his one-word instruction is capture. The divers, disciplined to a fault, obey and formulate a hasty plan to launch an assault, flanking one of the swimmers and attempting to throw a net over them as if they're a stray dog. Now consider the arrogance of humans, entering an environment they are not even built to survive, and acting like they've got the right to dominate life forms that clearly belong there. It would be a fatal move, but the reaction from the entities wasn't to fight. It was a physics lesson. As the divers close in to throw their nets over the silver-suited figure, the response is instantaneous. The entities don't draw knives or fire harpoons. There is no hand-to-hand combat, not even a struggle. Instead, the divers are hit by a focus wave of unknown energy. The survivors described it as a massive, concussive force that didn't just push them back. It propelled them upwards at astonishing speed. In diving, your greatest enemy isn't the water. It's the gas in your blood. When you breathe compressed air at depth, nitrogen dissolves into your bloodstream, ascends slowly, and the nitrogen comes out as a solution harmlessly. Ascend too fast, and that nitrogen forms bubbles in your blood. The gas blocks your arteries, it shreds your tissue, and it boils in your brain. We call it the bends. The force generated by the entities throws the 7 divers from a depth of 300 feet straight to the surface in seconds. They break the surface of Lake Baikal like corks, gasping, their bodies already in catastrophic failure. The rapid depressurization turns their blood into foam. The command crew on the boat haul them out of the water at speed. It is a scene of absolute horror. Men screaming as gas bubbles invade their joints and spines. What happens next will determine who lives and who dies. Now, here is the harsh reality of Soviet military medicine in the 1980s. Treatment for the bends is hyperbaric oxygen therapy, requiring patients to breathe pure oxygen in a pressurized chamber. What this does is shrink the nitrogen bubbles and allows them to pass from the body. The military facility at Baikal did have a decompression chamber on site, but it was designed for 2, maybe 3 men, certainly not 7. The command staff make an instant triage decision, shoving as many of the divers in as possible. But something goes horribly wrong. 3 of the divers die almost immediately. The trauma to their system is far too severe to survive life. The remaining 4 survive, but they are shattered. Their careers are over. Their bodies are wrecked by severe decompression sickness that will leave them in chronic pain and neurological damage for the rest of their lives. The entities in the water? They didn't pursue the divers. They never surfaced to finish the job. They vanished. It's likely they meant no harm. Remember, it is the divers who were the aggressors. But when threatened, they instinctively protected themselves, using a defensive mechanism human science can't explain. A non-lethal mechanism that only became lethal because of the human frailty. They spotted a fly, and unfortunately, the fly broke. The official report was immediately buried. The deaths were likely attributed to equipment failure, an unfortunate accident. Anything but the truth. But in a tight-knit community of military comrades, secrets have a way of leaking themselves out. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the files began to rot. Officers who had not been paid in months started talking. Documents that were stamped top secret ended up in the hands of researchers like Vladimir Azazia. They revealed that the Soviet Navy had been routinely encountering inexplainable anomalies in the water around the world. These encounters happened wherever they went. A presence in the ocean shadowed their nuclear fleet. Documented in the archives of the Soviet Intelligence Services detail, submarine commanders in the Northern and Pacific fleets report strange acoustic signatures. They sound like a frog croaking. These sounds circled the nuclear submarines. They changed tempo to match the submarines themselves. They actively jammed sonar frequencies. The terrified Soviet commanders were unable to lock on to the source. One declassified report of the Kurochkin archive speaks of an incident where the Soviet submarine captain, frustrated with this constant harassment, orders a full spread of torpedoes fired at the source of the sound. The result? Whatever was out there didn't just evade, it toyed with the torpedoes. And then its signal vanished, only to reappear instantly miles away. Many things in this report line up with the profile of the Baikal Incident. Surveillance. The divers in the lake and the submarine crews were seemingly being watched by entities in the water who observed their military exercises with curiosity, yet no aggression. The technological superiority. All reports detailed that the entities were capable of travelling at remarkably high speed, and they functioned with high intelligence but no detectable life support systems. At least, none that was known to human science. Defense engagement. They attacked only when provoked, and did so only by using repulsion field technology that we still don't possess today. Faced with a volume of evidence that was finally impossible to ignore, the Soviet Navy issued an extraordinary order. Do not engage. Now, think about that. A superpower that was ready to turn the world into radioactive dust just to prove a point to America, recognizes there was something in the water whose power they could not match. In Baikal, the orders to capture the entities had ended the lives of the divers who carried it out. The warnings were there. The consequences of believing human intellect and technology could ever prevail were clear, and there was a high price to be paid for anybody who had the arrogance to try. But of course, the question is, what were these USOs, and why were they there? Consider this. If you were an advanced intelligence operating bases on Earth, Would you put them in the middle of Times Square, or would you prefer to choose the Mariana Trench, under the ice of Antarctica, or the abyss of Lake Baikal? Look at the geology. Baikal is a generator. The immense pressure, the fault lines, the unique electromagnetic properties of the rift. It's a power source. It's a place where humanity cannot go without life support. It's a place where we are blind. We need to strip away the sci-fi gloss and look at this as an intelligence problem. If the Baikal account is indeed true, and the casualty reports, the witness testimonies and the subsequent hush-ups suggest it is, then we have to accept a terrifying reality. We are not dealing with visitors. Now, visitors land, take samples, they leave. Visitors don't build underwater habitats. Visitors don't defend their territory. The entities in the Baikal stood their ground. They neutralized the threat, and they did it with precision and confidence. The US Navy has recently released videos of unidentified Tic-Tac shaped objects dropping from space to sea level. This took place in a matter of seconds. They disappear into the water without a splash. Could this be part of the big picture? While we are looking up at the sky, worrying about the invasion from the stars, it seems the intelligence data from the Soviet archives suggest that we should be, perhaps, looking in the opposite direction. The silver suits, the lack of bubbles, the resistance to pressure. It certainly seems to point to a biology or a technology completely adapt to that hydrosphere. And consider the silence. Since 1982, there have been very few leaks from the Baikal. We do know that the Russian government has tightened control over the region. We know that Vladimir Putin himself has taken a mini-submarine to the bottom of the lake. But why? Officially, it was an exploration of the lake's natural resources. But surely, that's not a job that requires the involvement of the president. Unless there is a deal to be done. Perhaps the agreement between humans and the entities changed. Perhaps the standing order, do not engage, has evolved into a mutual understanding. The Baikal divers were victims of a reality check. They were looking for a fight, or at least to assert their dominance. Their commander made the sort of tactical error that every intelligence officer fears. He assumed that because we are human, we are indeed the apex predator. In one of the most hostile environments on the planet, his men didn't just die because of equipment failure. They died because they encountered a force that viewed them not as soldiers, but as pests. A nuisance to be swatted away like gnats. It's a humbling reminder that 70% of the Earth is covered by water, but 95% of that water still remains unexplored by us. We assume that the dark spots on the map are indeed empty. The Baikal Incident proves they are occupied. Standing on a beach looking out at the expansive ocean might perhaps lead you to consider the insignificance and fragility of human existence. And you would be right, but probably in a way that you have never stopped to imagine. But ask the families of the 3 men who died in 1982. Ask the 4 survivors whose bodies and minds were devastated on that day, who still wake up screaming from nightmares of silver figures in the gloom. And they will tell you the truth. The surface seems to be ours, but the deep belongs to them. Thanks for joining me here today. And remember, they rely on you forgetting, on you clicking away. Don't do it. Come with me deeper down the rabbit hole with this next video. And to make sure the signal can find you again, join the network, click subscribe here, and keep the light alive. This is Thinkavarium.